Alright, so you're back for the next video. Thank you again for joining me. So we're going to be opening up Ventuz. So hopefully you've managed to download it and install it. We're going to be running Ventuz 8.1. It's the Community Studio Edition. Let this load up. Alright, so I'm going to go here to. So you can see I have a few projects already here on the side here. You'll probably have some of these Ventuz runs, but you might not have any projects because you haven't built anything yet in Ventuz. But once you start creating them, you'll start to build a list of projects up here on the left. So what we're going to start off with is we're going to hit this new project button, right? And we're going to give it our project name. So we'll just call this quick guide, or quick start, or whatever you want to call this project name. You don't have to follow along with the actual project name or the naming conventions. This is just for the video. Alright, so where you want the project to be stored. So I suggest you make sure you have enough space for where your project is going to go. I'm putting this on my D drive into this folder here. Up. So just called Ventuz 8 Quick Starts project. So I'll show you this folder as well in a second. So once we create a project, you'll see that multiple subfolders will be created by Ventuz when you start a new project. This is to store like your images, your textures, movies, fonts, any assets you bring into Ventuz will be stored in your project folder. Right, you can give it an author name. You can give it a copyright if you want to give description. Making a video on the YouTubes. It could be whatever you want. Describing the project. Here, category. So you notice here we have my projects, which would be this category. But you can create your own category if you want. You could create a learning category. If I spelled that right. But anyway, learning. So that will appear on the left the next time you open it, and then your project will appear. You can choose a different icon if you want. So let's put on a hat. But you can also browse and add your own icon too. So feel free to do that if you feel you want to customize it more. Hit OK, and we'll jump into this logic view, right? So whether you start in a logic view, design view, animate view, data view, it doesn't matter. We'll go to the switch to the logic view up here. Now all of these layouts, they're just layouts really, presets kind of built for you to help you get started, but you can customize this entire interface. The great thing about Ventuz is you can close these windows, you can open these windows, and you can shift them and move them around. So to move a window, for example, around, if I was to grab this scene control window and just drag it out, so I'm just holding the right mouse, you can see we get this little icon that allows us to switch and move these layouts. So if I want to say place it here, I can. If I don't, I want to remove it, I can remove it. If I want it to be in the same window, I can just hover over it, and now I can tab between the windows, right? I'll go through what some of these windows are, and then if I close that, it's completely disappeared. Now, if you want to find a window, you go up here to the top right, top left, not right, left view, and here are all the windows, so the panels that you may need, and you'll be using this a lot. If I want to reset this workspace back to its default, I can just say reset and it's gone back. You can also save your default, so you can set this as a default layout. So once you change something, you can set it as a default. You can export this workflow if you want to take it to another machine or share it with someone else, and then you can re-import them. So you export and re-import this workflow. So once you change the layout. Okay, now taking a look at some of this window stuff. So what I like to do is I like to customize mine in a certain way. So for now, we don't need the scene control, so we're going to just close that. All right. Now this renderer, we always need this because this is our where we see our graphics. This is our world, right? it's an empty space right now. It's blank, but it is actually a 3D space. Um, so if you were to drop an object in, you would see, it's actual 3D space. It's just blank right now. Anyway, up here you have the hierarchy. Now you gotta imagine the hierarchy is kind of like um it holds all your visible objects like your 3D models, geometry, images, text, lights, camera, and it's structured like a tree. So objects are nested inside other children that are affected. So one above the other. So it's like the parent and the child. And then you can kind of create grouped items to move and rotate and scale them together. Um, so you could just kind of imagine it is your project is a movie scene, and then this hierarchy contains like the actors, the props, like the scenery, right? That goes in here. Now this window, the content window, because these two you'll be using a lot, right? And also the properties. The content window itself is you can think of it as the brain of the backstage, right, of your project. So it controls the logic, the behavior of that, what you see on the stage, which is our canvas here, our renderer, right? So we just imagine this is your stage, all right? And what it holds, this content window, what it holds is like the non-visual nodes. So it's your data sources, like your Excel, your text files, your animation, your logic, um, user interaction, maybe you have some scripts, and they're all connected and linked here. So it's kind of like how can I say it? It's like if the hierarchy has the actors, the content window has the director telling you the actors what to do. So you place them here. You place your actor here, and this where you're directing, saying this is what I want you to do, and you're connected to this, and you do this, and you do that, and so on. So this is where you the brains, and this is kind of like the props. Maybe that's an easier way to play it, but hopefully it makes sense as we go along. All right, so kind of explain those layers. You can think of these as almost like Photoshop. Um, like if you're familiar with Photoshop or After Effects, but this is actually you have 3D layers and 2D layers, and you can combine them. So if you click down here, you can see there's a lot more to just 2D layer and 3D layer. There's a lot more stuff you can do. But just to explain, it's like you can stack your graphics, so you can have 3D layers on top of 2D layers, or 2D layers on top of 3D layers. All sorts of crazy stuff you can do, and this is really powerful, the layering system. Stage editor is your canvas here. So say you had a different canvas size, or different screen or multiple screens, then here you could switch between those different screens using your stage editor to preview it. We'll go later into the whole render setup and do multiple screens a lot later, so don't worry too much about this. So for now, let's just close the stage editor. All right, so we're just simplifying it, and the properties here on the right. So properties, you have inputs and outputs, and you can turn on the split if you want. I like to turn the split on, or we can do it like this. It depends on how you want to do it. Let's do something like this. So you have your inputs and your outputs of a node. So for example, if we was to add an object, the properties of that object, the X, Y, Z values of a cube, of the size of it, for example, will appear here. I'll show you that just now in a second. So let's get started. So first thing we need to do is let's add a toolbox here in our window. You may notice here it says drag from the toolbox node and drop them in, or hit the space to open the fast toolbox. So if I hit space, you may notice I've got this differently. So here I can switch to alphabetical, right? And this is kind of like the different tabs in the toolbox. So if I was to go to geometry, for example, then I have all the geometry in that tab. So this is just a shortcut, the spacebar. So it's a great tip here for when you get started. But if you want to find the toolbox, you go to View, Toolbox, and we drop it in here. So I like to place my toolbox in the bottom left, like so. And for us to get started, so let's grab a cube, right? So we drop a cube into our world, and as you can see, like I was talking about the properties of that cube, for example. So I can change that scale on the properties of this cube. I can now change the scale, the X, the width, the depth. If we want to change the bevel, you know, everything has a property, right? But you may notice I'm not able to move this cube, right? This cube is I'm not able to move it. We're just looking at it flat on, right? And you may want to rotate this and move it around. So for this to work, you need to use an axis. You need to place an axis in front of it. Like I said, so your hierarchy where your actors or your props are put. So we need to say, well, this is an axis, and then this is the cube. So the axis now allows us to rotate this cube in the properties. I can move it up and down, back and forth, left and right. We can rotate this. We can scale it up and down. So you have a scale all. You have individual axis to control that. But remember, when I was saying that you have the parent and the child, so this is the parent now of this child. If I was to move this, so I'm going to just control and click and drag this cube out, you can see now this axis no longer controls this because it's not parented to it. It's not a child of. It's no longer a child of this tree. So this tree is a hierarchy, right? So now this doesn't control anything. So if I was to change the value on the X here, on the move position on X, nothing happens. And if I try to change that, there's nothing because there's no axis to drive it, right? So if I put this back, now I can move it around. Now on the interface, if you want to reset a value, you notice here on the right, you got these properties. You can reset these at any point and reset the values. Same for the cube. If I want to reset the values on that properties of the cube, I can just click on these little reset buttons on the right here, and it's reset. And then I can scale this up. Okay, so you can kind of see this. So we won't go too much into building any graphics right now. We're just kind of getting used to the interface, right? Now, if you want to drag an object inside the window, you can, but you need to make sure that you have your in-render edit mode on, right? So this needs to be turned on, but you also need to say, okay, I want to translate, so which would be the movement, the position, right? So you can see you got the arrows. And if I want to rotate, then I switch to the rotation. There's also a scale. You can scale it up and down. And you notice, as I scale it here, you can see the properties are changing. So it is updating the properties of that axis. And this object is now being deformed and changed, matching what we do here. Now you can like I said, normally I like to use the values because you have a lot more control and precision over exactly what you want. So if you want it to be like 1.5 by 1.35, for example, it will be there. You know, and then I can rotate this around and so on. Now, if you want to move this around like in 3D space, if you hold Alt middle mouse, you can see pans. Alt right is zoom. Alt left button kind of rotates, which is also the orbit, right? There is a grid. You can turn the grid on at any time. So there's a show grid. There you go. So you can show the grid and you can move around. If I hold down the right mouse button and do the WASD, then just like any game that you're familiar with, and then the speed, if I want to pick up speed, I can scroll the middle mouse button, and you can see here the speed is changing, and I can zoom in there. So if you're familiar with, um, you know, Unreal Engine or different applications, maybe use Blender, you know, Alt, middle mouse, yeah. So you have the ability to do this, but what you need to remember, this mode here is not what you're going to output, right? Once you go back into your tab, this is your actual view right here. All right. So what are some of these buttons up here? So I've shown you the gizmo button, the translate, scale, move. Now these are just the alignment buttons, and which would be, you've got these alignments, so your rotation center, scaling center, for example, um, and oh yeah, this zoom scroll is quite cool. So if you want to zoom in and out of your canvas, you can also press this. Oh, it's useful if you have multiple screen or layouts, or a really big screen or big canvas. You can focus on one particular area. You can zoom in and work on that. You got the full screen. If you hit that, it will go full screen. If you have a second monitor, that is great for running that in full screen, and then you can work here and see everything on your second screen. Key and fill. So you want to see it in with a key and fill if you're doing broadcast graphics. That's the key and fill preview. Wireframe, bounding box, sorry. Now this input diagnosis that's great for seeing if your touch is working on a touch screen, for example. So I've got a touch screen, so if I was to take two fingers, you can see now there's two touch IDs, multi-touch IDs for my fingers right there on the touch screen. So it's great if you want to see, why is my touch not working? Is it my hardware? A great way to find out. Anyway, of course you got stats. If you want to check your hardware, if you're running into memory issues or CPU or GPU issues, maybe you have too many textures or too much geometry, you can just hit that diagnostics, the statistics or whatever, and you can find out, you know, what's causing the issues of your performance. Wireframe mode, hit the wireframe. Scopes, this is for color. I'm not really going to cover that. And then this is the stage editor, kind of. Yeah, we don't need to look at that right now. And then over here, the far right, this is like render to this, but we'll cover these stuff later on. So hopefully this just gives you an overview of the interface. Now, I kind of just jumped ahead. So I'll show you how to grab something out of the toolbox just once again. So we go to the world tab. So we look for world tab. So the world tab is here, which I had open. Then we're going to go to axis. If you see anything with a stack like this, you can right click and it will reveal different axes, or like, you got anchor, shear. That's like a group of different, tools in that node, so in that stack. But we just need the axis, so we can just drag this up. All right, and then now we want a geometry. Now feel free to use any of these geometries. You don't need to follow along. You can just drop in a cube, and what I want you to do is just play around with the, position, get used to using the scale, like playing around with the scale, the rotation, getting used to dragging these values yourself. All right. So, and if you hold control and drag, you can go more precise. Smaller increments. If you was to let go of control, you get larger numbers. So get used to some of these buttons, and moving them around. Now, where I said, remember where we talked about layers? You see here, if I go to this, if I was to turn this 3D layer off, because essentially we're in a 3D layer. So if I was to turn this off, the whole layer disappears. If I was to turn it on, it appears again. And because these are layers, if we was to add a layer, so if we were to say, let's just add a 2D layer, for example, right? This really just we'll just cover an interface, but I'll just show you as well. So if I just said, let's just use this texture loader, right? It will just give us a checkered board. Now, because this is on top, so this is whatever's at the top of the tree is at the back, and whatever at the bottom of the tree is in front, right? So now this checkered board is kind of hiding our 3D layer. So if I want to remove it, put this above, now you can see now this 2D texture is going to be the background, and now we still have our 3D layer. So if I click on the little pen, you can see here in the hierarchy, I can move this around. Hopefully this makes sense. So you can layer stuff, you know, and of course, you know, I could add another layer, another 2D layer. Let's just add another texture loader, but this time under texture loader, I'm just going to do, let's see, let's just, do I have any textures? Yeah, okay, I'll just get a random texture. So I've got this X-ray, but as you can see, it's just a PNG with a transparent image. Now, this 2D textured layer is sitting in front, while we have this 3D layer in between two layers, right? So, you know, so hopefully that makes sense. But if I was to move this forward and Z, that layer is always going to be in front. It will never, this layer here, this X-ray will always be, you know, sitting right there, no matter what. All right. So that makes sense. I'll delete these because we don't really need that, and we don't need that. So just to delete something you can. If you want to, on the interface as well here, if we just we look at here up the top, you have this blocked and inactive. You'll use these a lot. Sometimes you may keyframe them, or sometimes you just want to like block something temporary, see something else, see a different object behind or something else in the window. So you can hit this button and it will block it from the tree. So it's blocked. It's just hidden, right? You haven't deleted it. It's just blocked. If I was to say, okay, I want to ignore this axis and just display the cube, I can click on the axis and I can say inactive. So now these properties of the axis are not going to be applied to the cube, so we're going back to its original point, right, where the cube is. If I was to turn that back on, now it's taking the parent's value, so it's taking the position, rotation, and scale, and then applying it to the cube. Everything has a block and inactive, you can see. So there's different ways. So shortcut is Control B, Control A to make it inactive. You can press these buttons up here, but also in the property values, you have block and inactive as well here. Okay, so that's just one thing. You can also color code these. So if you click here on this node, you can say color 1, color 2, whatever you want. So you know you can make this all red, or different sections of your tree you can color code so you can identify. If you want to name an item, for example this cube, if we want to rename it, you just double click the name and you can call it the books, you know, and now that is called the box. And this here I could call axis. So you can name anything and what you want. It doesn't have to be all uppercase. It can be uppercase, lowercase, you know. Depends on your workflow. It's going to be all lowercase. The box. There's no right or wrong way, right? It's just what you're used to, your workflow. Don't let someone tell you, oh, it has to always be uppercase, lowercase. It's whatever you're used to working with in your team, how they like to work, right? So as long as you understand how to share, or if it's just you working solo, yeah, do what you feels most what you're comfortable with, right? And then you've got this edit annotations. If you want to annotate anything, so let's hit annotate. Now we have an annotation box. this is a cube. It's amazing. So you can leave notes on anything as well. If you don't want to see them, you can turn them off, turn them on. Yeah. And you can also bookmarks. So once you have a load of um, assets or objects in your hierarchy, you can also bookmark them and jump straight to it as well. So there's a lot. There are a lot of tools here to cover, and we'll cover more of it in the other videos. I don't want this to go on too long, but yeah, feel free just play around. Like I said, move the item, get used to the interface, move some of this around. Maybe you want to change the layout. I kind of like to work like this. So my inputs and outputs. I have my content window hierarchy, renderer here, toolbox on the left, and layers up here. We'll also add the animation. I like to place in the bottom left here as well. So I'm going to place this over here. I'm going to just drag this in. And you can see, you can also rearrange the tabs by just dragging those tabs. So it can be toolbox, and then this is my animation. Like, so I like to work like this. This is kind of like the workflow I'm used to. So you may see me do that in future videos. So, but feel free to, work whatever's best way for you. All right. If you want to save your scene, for example, this cube, if we go to File, Save As, and we can call this the cube. And you notice it's going to save it into the scenes folder. It has a scenes folder. So if I save this as the cube, if we go to that folder where we created the project directory at the start, this is the subfolders that I was talking about. So, you have your scenes. So if I was to go in there you go. There's the file we just saved, the cube. So any assets in the future when we're creating when we're creating stuff for the project, like if it was to bring in a movie clip, it would go in the movies. If you have like some data, maybe it will go in there, audio files, images, and so on. There's a folder for everything. You got textures, sound, scripts, repositories. So it's really powerful geometry, and we'll be using all of these folders over the next few videos, hopefully, and you'll understand. All right, and lastly, one last thing. If you was to hit F1 on anything, it doesn't matter what it is in the scene, or if you wanted to find the help files, go up here, top right. Definitely, this is a great one. Go here, hit help, and you get nice documentation on Ventuz. They have videos, they've got like links, topics, you can search, fantastic documentation. But not only that, if we go here and hit F1 on a node, you can get an example. You can also get a how-to. So if I hit the how-to, it will take me straight there in the documentation, and it will tell me what this does. So it's used to position, orientate, and scale complete subtrees, which we've just done. So it's just so we're scaling and rotating, moving, and so every node you can find out. If you want to know what this node does or any other node, if you just want to say, oh, what does the material do, I can just click here. There's a ton of examples to help you get started, and there are also detailed um, descriptions in here as well, which is fantastic, right? There's all the documentation that you need to get help you get started with. Alright, so hopefully I'll see you in the next video, and hopefully we start to make something more interesting now. So hopefully you're a bit more comfortable with the interface and I haven't waffled on too much. Yeah, you can save your work if you want to save this scene. Entirely up to you. We will start with a new scene in the next video. Alright, take it easy. Bye bye.